What if the worst mistake of your life turned out to be the greatest gift someone else ever received? In 1967, a group of men sat around a table in a county clerk's office in the Mississippi Delta, laughing. Not the polite kind of laughter, the cruel kind. The kind reserved for when you've just sold someone something worthless and pocketed their last dollar. They had just unloaded 340 acres of waterlogged, mosquito-ridden, flood-prone swampland. Land that had been sitting on their books for 11 years without a single serious buyer. And they had sold it for $8,000 to a widow from a small farming town in the Arkansas Delta. Her name was Dorothy May Calloway, and as far as those men were concerned, Dorothy May Calloway had just made the worst financial decision in the history of Bolivar County. They were wrong. To understand what happened next, you have to understand where Dorothy May came from. She was born in 1921 in Marianna, Arkansas, a small agricultural town in Lee County, tucked inside the fertile crescent of the Arkansas Delta, where the Mississippi River had been laying down rich black topsoil for 10,000 years. Marianna was farming country, cotton country. People there didn't just grow crops, they understood the land. They read it the way a doctor reads a patient. Dorothy's father, Earl Sims, farmed 40 acres of bottomland outside Marianna, and from the time she could walk, she walked those fields beside him. She learned that the lowest, wettest ground, the ground everyone else avoided, was often where the richest soil lay, because water carried nutrients with it when it moved. By the time she married Harold Calloway in 1944, she had developed an eye that most trained agronomists didn't have. She could look at a piece of land and feel what was underneath it. Harold died in 1963, leaving Dorothy with a modest life insurance payout, a small house on the outskirts of Helena, Arkansas, and a fierce, unshakable instinct that she was not done yet. She was 42 years old, and she was just getting started. By 1966, Dorothy had been quietly scanning land listings across the Mid-South for 3 years. She wasn't looking for the beautiful parcels, the cleared, fenced, irrigated farmland that sold for top dollar along Highway 61. She was looking for the overlooked, the rejected, the land people had given up on. That's when she found the listing for the Bolivar County tract, 340 acres along a backwater tributary of the Sunflower River in the Mississippi Delta, one of the most agriculturally significant regions in all of North America. The Mississippi Delta, stretching from Memphis down through the heart of Mississippi, was legendary. It had produced cotton, soybeans, and some of the richest harvests in American history. Delta soil was among the most productive on the planet. But this particular parcel, it had flooded 6 times in 11 years. It was dense, with bald cypress trees, thick briar, and standing water. Previous owners had tried twice to drain it and failed both times. County assessors had written it off. Local farmers called it the bog. They said it was fit for nothing but frogs and cottonmouth snakes. The asking price had dropped from $22,000 all the way down to $8,000. Dorothy made an appointment. When Dorothy drove out to view the land in the spring of 1967, the realtor, a heavy-set man named Gerald Pruitt, didn't even bother to get out of the car at first. He rolled down his window and gestured toward the tree line like he was pointing at a pile of garbage. "That's it," he said, "all the way back to that ridge. It's wet. It's been wet. It'll stay wet. I'm just being honest with you, ma'am." Dorothy got out of the car. She pulled on rubber boots she had brought from the trunk and walked into the property alone while Gerald waited, engine running, radio playing. She was in there for 2 hours. When she came back, her boots were caked in black mud. She had taken samples, handful after handful of soil from different depths, different pockets of the land. She had noticed the unusual reddish-brown streaking in the subsoil along the western edge. She had seen the strange, heavy gray clay that appeared near the center of the tract, the kind of dense, mineral-loaded substrate that didn't belong in a typical river-bottom wetland. She wiped her hands on a rag and said, calmly, "I'll take it." Gerald Pruitt drove back to the county office, called his colleagues, and they had their laugh. Dorothy closed on the property in July 1967 with $8,000, nearly every dollar she had. Her two sons, James and Robert Calloway, thought she had lost her mind. Friends in Helena shook their heads. A neighbor who had farmed the Delta for 30 years told her flatly, "Dorothy, that land will never produce a thing. You've thrown your money into a swamp." She smiled, thanked him for his concern, and went back to work. For the first year, Dorothy didn't try to farm anything. She observed. She kept a journal, a battered composition notebook she carried in her truck's glove box, where she recorded rainfall levels, drainage patterns, how water moved across the land in different seasons. She collected more soil samples and sent them off to the Agricultural Extension Service at Arkansas State University, asking for full mineral content analysis. What came back in early 1968 stopped her breath. The soil analysis showed something the county assessors and previous owners had completely missed. Buried beneath that useless, waterlogged swampland were dense deposits of barite, barium sulfate, a heavy mineral used in oil drilling operations as a primary component of drilling mud. It was also used in the production of paints, glass, and rubber, and demand for it, driven by the booming oil exploration industry in the Gulf of Mexico, was surging. But barite wasn't the only thing the analysis found. The land also showed significant concentrations of titanium dioxide, found in the heavy mineral sands mixed throughout the subsoil. And in the northwestern corner, the area Dorothy had specifically noticed with that strange reddish-brown streaking, there were measurable deposits of manganese ore. Combined mineral value estimates, even at 1968 prices, exceeded $40 million. Dorothy didn't announce anything. She wasn't that kind of woman. Instead, she spent the next 18 months quietly securing a mineral rights attorney out of Jackson, Mississippi, a man named Franklin Okafor, whose practice specialized in extraction rights across the Gulf South. She had the land professionally surveyed. She got a second, independent geological assessment. She explored leasing options with 3 separate mining and materials companies operating in the Delta region. By the fall of 1969, a deal was quietly signed. A materials extraction company leased the mineral rights to Dorothy's 340 acres for an upfront payment of $310,000, more than 38 times what she had paid for the land, plus ongoing royalties. And that's when the story got out. The Bolivar County Commercial Appeal ran it first. Then the Memphis Press Scimitar picked it up. By early 1970, the story of the widow from Helena, Arkansas, who bought the bog for $8,000 and walked away with a fortune, had made its way into regional farm newspapers across the Mid-South. Gerald Pruitt, the realtor who hadn't even bothered to get out of the car, reportedly declined to comment. Dorothy didn't move away from the Delta after her windfall. She didn't build a mansion in Memphis or retire to Florida. She bought another piece of land, this time in Coahoma County, and she farmed it. Soybeans, mostly. She built a small drainage cooperative with 4 neighboring families, the kind of community infrastructure that lifted the productivity of everyone around her. She funded 2 scholarships at Arkansas State University for students pursuing agricultural sciences, and she kept that battered composition notebook. In a rare interview with the Delta Farm Press in 1972, Dorothy was asked what had made her see value in land that every expert had dismissed. She paused for a long moment before answering. "My father used to say, 'The land doesn't lie,'" she said. "People lie, assessors lie, price tags lie. But the land always tells you the truth, if you're willing to get your boots muddy enough to listen." By the time the 1970s were fully underway, Dorothy May Calloway had become something of a legend in agricultural circles across Arkansas and Mississippi. Not because she had gotten rich, but because of how she had gotten rich. She hadn't gambled. She hadn't gotten lucky. She had done the thing that everyone else had been too proud, too comfortable, or too dismissive to do. She had looked closer. She had walked into the mud when everyone else stayed in the car. She had sent soil samples when everyone else sent dismissals. She had trusted decades of inherited knowledge over the consensus of men who had never really tried. The men who sold Dorothy Mae Calloway 340 acres of useless swamp for $8,000 had one thing in common. They never bothered to really look at what they had. Dorothy looked, and what she found changed her life forever. There's something deeply human about this story. The idea that the things the world throws away are sometimes the things most worth holding on to. That the people who get dismissed the loudest are sometimes the ones who see the clearest. That patience, curiosity, and the willingness to get your hands dirty can reveal value where everyone else saw nothing. Dorothy Mae Calloway's story is one of hundreds, maybe thousands, of remarkable, forgotten farm stories buried in the archives of American agricultural history. Stories of ordinary men and women who did extraordinary things in the fields, the wetlands, the prairies, and the valleys of this country, often with little recognition and even less credit. If that kind of story moves you, if you believe these voices deserve to be heard, then hit that subscribe button right now. Every week, we dig into the real history of American land, farming, and the extraordinary people who worked it. No fluff, no myths, just stories worth knowing.